Hi, so I'm here with Laura McCartan from the Mojatu Foundation. We're going to have a quick chat about kind of careers and her sort of her progression to where she is now, and hopefully this will give you a bit of a background on on sort of going into this type of industry or this type of organisation. So I'll start you off with a nice easy one, Laura. So can you tell us about your job title or job role and kind of what that involves?
Yeah, so my job title is fundraising and communications manager, which sounds super easy, but actually I kind of manage all of the projects for Mojatu Foundation. I manage the staff that run those projects, and then I figure out how we communicate that to like the outside world, how we get donors to support our work, and then we have people who fund our programs. So I have to ask them for money really nicely and write a lot of stuff about what we're doing.
Okay.
And then and then report on how we're doing and kind of monitor all our projects and make sure they're going okay.
Brilliant. Okay, so it sounds like quite a varied role, probably all sorts going on there with you. So if you could tell us a little bit then, because for a lot of students that might not know, I mean, I'm sure some will kind of look the organisation up after this, but can you tell us a little bit about sort of what the organisation does in general and kind of the other parts of the organisation or the people and other roles that sort of revolve around you as well?
Yeah, so we're quite a big organisation. We've grown a lot over the last couple of years. My part is a charity, and we support women and girls from new and emerging communities around Nottingham. We do lots of things, basically help them with English as a second language, helping them with specific skill building and helping them get jobs, and then help with gender-based violence that affects a lot of women and girls in different communities. But at the same organisation, we've got like a media side of us, which deal with, we run a magazine which focuses particularly on the African community. We do videos and podcasts, we train young people. So we try and get kids away from knife crime and train them in media instead. So in terms of other jobs, there's like a lot of different stuff you could be doing. We've got videographers, photographers that work with us. We have trainers that train people in that. We've got the people who manage all of that. We've got admin people that help us keep all of these, like if you've got lots of students, that's lots of different pieces of paper, and that's all private and confidential. So we need people to look after that.
Yeah.
We've got interns who help us with our social media most of the time. And then we've got specific project staff for like women and girls projects, and probably a load of other stuff I've forgotten. There's a lot of jobs.
Okay. Yeah, so as you say, plenty going on there, isn't there, really, and a lot to keep track of. So, I mean, with that in mind, I mean, I suspect the answer and it kind of, is this way a lot of the time when I interview people now, especially with kind of everything that's going on with COVID. Could you talk us through what might be a typical day in your role? I mean, if there is one at all.
There isn't really, but I'll tell you my plan for the day. So I've got this first, and then after I finish this interview, I've got to go to my office, and I'm helping manage a project. So I'm speaking to the project staff about a project which is training community leaders to kind of bring their communities together and talk about different issues and how they can solve them. And then after that, I've got another meeting which is training or it's finding mentors for young Black men with that project leader. And then after that, since the start of Corona, we've got a food bank. So we deliver food across the city. So I'm going there at 3 p.m. to kind of manage all of like 60 boxes of food, all of the people bringing the food, all of the drivers taking the food away. And the Corona restrictions just got worse. So we've got to make sure that all of that is really done without anyone touching and social distancing and things. Yeah. So it's going to be busy.
Yeah, well, it sounds like, a role that, as you say, very varied, lots to keep track of, but, potentially very rewarding as well, sort of, on a good day if things go to plan.
Yeah, and I get to, basically, I'm never really in my office. Before I got to meet like lots of different people and see all of the cool stuff they do in their community each week. Now I do that a lot more online, but it's still really fun and everyone is happy to get involved.
That's great. Nice. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So just to kind of step back a little bit then, could you tell us a little bit sort of about the kind of your background and the path you've taken to get to what you're doing now? So maybe in terms of any previous roles you've had or what you did in education kind of to get you to this point?
Yeah. So when I say, okay, my background is I have a master's degree in international human rights law. Wow. But I think that sounds really scary. And actually what I would say about that is it's my work experience that got me most of my jobs. Okay. So I've always worked in humanitarian response before this job, which means that when you see like an emergency on the news, like an earthquake or something, they send out people who help with that. Or I've been doing stuff. So I was doing earthquake rebuilding, so like building schools after the earthquake in Nepal. I've worked on women's development work in Sri Lanka and Nepal. I've done the same in Kenya, and I work with street connected children in Uganda before this, and most recently on a search and rescue team in Greece who work with refugees who come on dinghies. So yeah, I do have a big degree obviously, but I would say volunteering has probably been the biggest thing. So like working with lots of different charities and meeting lots of people and being able to kind of help out wherever it's needed is a lot more useful than, well, not more useful, obviously it's great to have a good degree as well, but yeah, both equally helpful.
Brilliant. Okay. And I think that's something that comes up a lot kind of when we speak to people now, especially kind of, people that are doing roles that are, that kind of in terms of at the COVID point of view at the moment have kind of got, become a bit more online and kind of, kind of exist more in this world where there's a lot of virtual meetings and things like that, as well, as you mentioned previously. I think it's kind of a recurring theme is that, obviously, although having a degree and a kind of formal education is really, really good and really useful, a lot of the time, I think what comes through is that it's kind of, recurring kind of traits that people push is obviously, people skills and having empathy, and also being able to kind of interact with people in a kind of engaging way. And that's something, I guess, that's really sort of integral to your role as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and I would say I have a master's from like when I figured out what I wanted to do. So obviously when I did my first degree, then I went into the world and I basically went abroad and worked abroad for like 6 years or something. So that's when I figured out like exactly what my career plan would be. So all of the time in that, I was like meeting different types of people, learning about different people's cultures and getting like those kind of skills instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really interesting. As you say as well, it's got you kind of all over the world as well, isn't it? So that's
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
kind of probably quite attractive to a lot of people, I think, if they're thinking about going down that sort of route as well. So, I mean, in terms of, the actual role that you're doing at the moment, is there any sort of particular advice or tips or kind of, maybe even things to kind of not do or ignore for people that are considering going kind of down your career path?
I would say listen to everyone, basically, particularly in like humanitarian response. There's a kind of ego. There's a lot of big egos and thinking that you're saving the world, but I think everybody can help in lots of different ways. And I think volunteering is really, really important. And it also gives you an idea of if you enjoy it or not, because sometimes you're in really like dangerous or high stress situations, which isn't easy. Particularly for my job, I think being able to work with people. So we're all from basically different countries in my office, and that's really amazing, and it helps us learn from each other. So being able to work with other people and understand that you come from like wildly different cultures, and that sometimes that might infuriate me, but that's okay. And like being able to listen and work with people is really cool. And my other advice would probably be speaking languages, just because I think that's really cool and gets you everywhere in life.
Yeah, definitely agree. That's
Which
something.
I don't actually.
Yeah, it's definitely something. I mean, I know that throughout this period, I know a lot of people have kind of, in their spare time been trying to pick up languages and using sort of Duolingo and things like that. So I think that's something that is definitely getting pushed more these days. I wish, from my point of view, I wish there'd been more emphasis on that when I was younger. I did Spanish to GCSE, but not kind of beyond sort of holiday sort of stuff. And I think, as the world kind of becomes smaller, if you like, and especially when people are more interconnected kind of in, the virtual space, I think that's something that's really important, isn't it? So definitely something there for, students that speak more than one language or are interested in that. It's definitely a good tool to kind of have in your toolkit as well. So, I mean, just kind of, on your particular role, then how did you come to be involved with the Mojatu Foundation?
Okay, yeah, this is probably another piece of advice. Networking is important. So I was working in Nepal, actually. Well, I was back from Nepal, and I just happened to go to an event, and somebody asked me to pick up some speakers from their office. And funnily enough, the managing director scratched the side of my car, and I stayed calm. Yeah, and I wasn't that upset. And we just stayed in contact. And I think I then went and worked in Uganda, and we stayed in touch, and I understood what they were doing and came and helped out at some of their events. And then I was leaving my role in Uganda, and they asked me a few times if I'd come and work with them, and I eventually agreed. Yeah, and we've been friends for maybe like 5-10 years, something like that. And yeah, it's been really, really great to be in such a like good community environment.
Yeah, it's great as well. I mean, I think that happens a lot with people. You kind of get those sort of sliding doors moments, don't you, where, something really small like that might kind of lead to a bigger opportunity. And again, great advice there about networking. I always, we try to get across to students that, obviously kind of looking further afield, tools like kind of LinkedIn and on social media are really useful these days. And I know that's something that students are very savvy with, but definitely worth kind of not underestimating those things as tools for keeping in touch with people. And as you say, when you pick contacts up and you kind of get a feeling from some, from somebody that what they're working on is important and kind of worthwhile,
Yeah.
it's definitely worth keeping in touch over that sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I would say, like, you might not want that job right now, but in a few years you'll think that would be really cool and I could really make
Yeah.
a difference if I work with that organisation. And you might want to do it.
Brilliant. Okay. So just in terms then, for our students of kind of looking ahead, if they're kind of thinking about going into the world of work in general, or, more specifically kind of going into, sort of similar kind of humanitarian outreach type stuff, or, charity type work, is there any are there any websites or blogs or anything like that that you think would be worth them kind of keeping on top of, or any, sometimes people recommend podcasts or YouTube channels, all sorts of weird and wonderful things.
Do you know what? I actually was thinking about this yesterday and I couldn't think of a single good podcast on this topic. So I've decided to make my own. So you can listen to that when I'll send it to you whenever I make it. But I would say, yeah, it's really difficult because basically in all of these different issues in different countries, they've got specific podcasts and specific websites that you can look at. So I would say just try lots of different things, basically. My other advice would be the only podcast I listen to, one of them is Jamila Jamil's I Weigh one, which is more about mental health.
Yeah.
But I think if you want a job, obviously it's super essential that you're comfortable with your mental health and can understand kind of the balance between working and like looking after yourself. And also the Receipts podcast, which is just like mainly just for girls, but it's super empowering and will make you feel super confident when you have to go to job interviews.
Great. Okay, some really good recommendations there. So we'll put those alongside the video as well for students to have a look at. I mean, definitely something kind of topical you talk about there. I think tomorrow's World Mental Health Day, isn't it, as well? So that's something I think students are aware of and will definitely, take a look at as well. I mean, really then, what I tend to do at this point is, I mean, this is kind of where we would normally wrap up, but in terms of kind of, just to sort of point out, some of the things you've gone over there, specifically, obviously you've mentioned there about kind of the organization. So is there any, are there any sort of social media channels or websites, that the students can sort of check Mojatu Foundation out at and have a look and keep up to date with what you're doing?
Yeah, so we've got basically all social media, I think. We've got Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We also take internships. So if anyone wants to come and volunteer, we love having people to kind of train you in social media, and it's also a really good way to get into charity work. Also our like sister or partner organization that deal with the media side are called Fearless Youth Association, and their Instagram is great and they do loads of really cool podcasts. So I would encourage checking them out. Yeah,
brilliant. Okay, so we'll link to all of that here as well. And you may find that some students do get in touch with you in future about the internship side of things then. Great. Okay, well, I know you're really busy, Laura, so I'll leave you to it, but thank you very much for your time. And on behalf of the learners, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been fun. Cool.